Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast, where we explore health, wellness, performance, and try to improve not only your quantity of life, but your quality of life. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. Episode 20, we are getting into healthy relationships with Dr. Tara Vossenkemper. She is a counselor who sees married or just committed couples who are interested in maintaining their relationship and improving the quality of their relationship. If you're like me, you believe that a happy spouse means a happy house, you want to stay with the person you're with, listen to this episode, pick up some tools for overcoming conflict, and good luck to us all.
Yeah, that's the first peak of divorces that are on that, I would say 7-ish year mark, but like 6, 7, something like that. There's
Okay.
yeah, that's like literally like divorces happen like this over time. So
Oh,
yeah,
really?
7 years, and then again like 14-ish, and then 21-ish, and yeah.
Does it kind of get in vogue with like peer groups? Like my buddy Johnny got divorced. Like I think I'm gonna do it too. Or like is there something
Oh, interesting.
conscious like that?
Okay, so what's really mm, I'm gonna say no. I think maybe there's some social influence. Like if you're unhappy in your relationship and you've got a friend who got divorced and they're just like so much happier, it might have some influence, but if anything, it's just gonna like speed up the trajectory. It's not like you're not gonna change if you're relatively happily partnered, you're not gonna
Yeah.
change over to like let's lean towards divorce. It just because one
Yeah.
of your friends, is getting or multiple of your friends even are getting divorced or separating if they're just, cohabiting and committed. Um, I did remember hearing once that, gosh, I can't remember if it was gorillas or chimps, some sort of like maybe greater ape of some sort, how they basically mate for about 7 years and then they're done with that partner and they sort of move on. And I was like, that's so
Oh,
interesting. That's so
wow.
interesting. Yeah, wild that to think that
Yeah.
we're, doing something similar, like at least in like similar sort of similar-ish amounts of time. I thought it
Yeah.
was really, really fascinating. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's about like that. It really is like that time frame, like about 7-ish years.
So it's like 6 or 7 years, and then
Yeah.
what, like 19 years? What's the second wave? Is there?
About 14.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's about 14 years and then about maybe 21 to 24. I always forget like that third one, but you see like divorces peak in that first 7 and then the next 7 it's about another peak and then a third little peak. And then I
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
beyond that. I don't really know beyond that. But there are such
Okay.
things as gray divorces, people who have been together for 40 or 50 years and they're like, "All right, peace out. Like I'm done. Like this is not, this isn't working." And potentially they've been unhappily, I don't know enough about the research about gray divorces, but it might be that they've been unhappily married. There are plenty of people who are unhappily committed. So I don't think marriage is not like a marker for satisfaction in a relationship. It's just a marker for commitment, basically, like we're staying together. Um, yeah, so I can't speak to gray divorces as a side note, but they do happen. There's even like the phrase gray divorces is relatively new. It's a relatively new term. My background is I guess counselor ed and supervision. So my PhD is training other counselors. That's like pretty much what it's about. It's to be an academic. So scholarly work or research, clinical work or therapy, supervision, so training baby counselors, and then teaching. So I did that. I went into academia. I hated it. I fucking hated it. It was just for a couple years. I love being a student. I did not like, it might have been where I was, but I did not like the experience of being in academia. And so I shifted. Throughout that entire time, like my PhD program, I'd been in therapy, like doing therapy. I was always practicing. And so when I left the PhD program, I went full time into private practice, and that very quickly shifted into a group practice because I had people that wanted to work with me as supervisees. So they came on, I gave them clients, and then they stayed full. And so now I run a group practice. I have 2 locations, and we have plans to continue like growing, but I want it to be organic rather than this really like forcing a boulder. I don't. It needs to be organic, just with where I am in life right now, just having young kids and In terms of therapy, I have been in practice for over a decade, and I've been seeing couples the entire time. I think probably in 2014 is when I really, maybe 15 is when I really started to get more into the research around couples and like diving into like specific trainings and getting into the research. And that, I mean, still continues. Like, I think I have the, just the other day, I was like thumbing through The Science of Marriage, which is a John Gottman book. And so yeah, so I still have a small caseload at very, very small at this point. I just see, and I exclusively work with couples. So boom, I think that's mostly it. I could probably say more, but I think that that's like the gist of who I am and what my life is like right now.
Excellent. What are the top handful of reasons that people are coming and needing help?
Yeah, anything. Um, Literally anything. So there's this sort of joke, what do people fight about? What's the number one thing people fight about? The answer is nothing. The number one thing people fight about is nothing. Like a sock on the floor, or the dishes, or the in-laws, or sex, or money, or talking, or your friends, or your kids, or nothing. The biggest fight my husband and I got into was whether or not ghosts, or whether or not gorillas have ghosts or chimps have ghosts. Like, I swear one of the biggest fights we've been in to date was whether or not primates have ghosts. And it's not about the content of the fight. I think this is where couples therapy for me is just so fun. I don't care what people come in and talk about. It just has to be important to them, because what they're fighting about is not like what they're fighting about, it's how it's happening. So it's whether or not they are able to soothe themselves in the middle of a conversation. It's whether or not they're able to stop a conversation from negatively escalating. It's how a conversation starts, the way a complaint is brought up. It's whether or not they are defensive or critical or contemptuous in the middle of a conflict or just even an everyday conversation. It's whether or not they accept influence from one another. It's whether or not they compromise, which doesn't mean they end up on the same page. It means that they're willingly able to like try to get closer to the center, whatever their center is. That's what people fight about. That's the reason that fights unfold. It's whether someone had a shitty day and they just haven't had any place to unload. It's like there's not only individual things that can lead into reasons why people might fight and not be able to navigate that. And I think I'm stuck on fighting right now because people coming in the door is we don't talk, we fight too much, we don't know how to fight, we're mad about this thing that happened 10 years ago, or there's been an affair, or there's active addiction, or there was addiction, but once we haven't recovered from it, or, so it's like fighting and talking or lack thereof, or some like addiction, affair recovery, something, some sort of betrayal, let's say, betrayal recovery. So that's like a non-answer, but it's literally like people come in for anything. They really come in for anything. Yeah.
So then do you start, or maybe is your entire process maybe teaching them how to fight fair and like establishing rules
Okay.
for conflicts, or
Yeah.
what percentage, what are you using? I guess the other side of the coin of that question is, what are the top handful of
Yeah.
interventions that you're like, oh, it's one of those cases, it's an A, B, or C, D case,
Yeah.
which one do I have to like, which hat do I have to wear right now, and what's my
Yeah.
strategy? So what are the interventions that you might attack with?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So if I answer question one, I told you I was thumbing through this book, The Science of Marriage. And it's so good. It's just dense and it's all about couples, which, it's like, it's very, very good. Anyway, one of the things I was looking at, he talked about the core triad of balance. And so when I think about couples therapy, it's like if a couple is sitting in front of me, it's just so easy to see what's happening. For me, I've been doing it a long time. I really love it. So it's to see what's happening is kind of simple. Um, it's just kind of simple. Like you're like, oh yeah, okay, there's some horsemen. This is how fights go. Okay, okay, cool, I got it. And then it's trying to help them figure out how do we sort of fix this thing? But what's not simple is explaining to people what we're doing, because as they are in it, they're, it's like you're in the thick of a storm and you don't really understand which way is north or south or east or up or down. You have no idea what's happening. From a like very meta perspective, what couples therapy is about is trying to achieve a new balance. And it's this core triad of balance. Let me see if I remember this because this is so fresh. There are 3 pieces because it's triad. So what we're trying to do is change perception, behavior, and physiology. We're trying to do all 3 things. At any given point in time, we're going to be tending to one of those things. And so for couples, that's like the main goal is achieving new, but they would not say this, but I know as a couples therapist, my main goal for them is new balance. And that means, again, perception, physiology, and behavior. In couples therapy, the behavioral changes are going to be those interventions. It's going to be, look, if I said to you, like, can you just fucking unload the dishwasher, please? Like, I literally asked you 10 times, why have you not done it? As a therapist, I'm going to hear that and say, hey, let's just pause for 1 second. Let me give you some new language. Like, let's try this instead. I'm super frustrated about the dishwasher. I think I've asked you multiple times, at what point can you get it done? Like, can we agree on a time that you can get it done, please? That's how I'm going to introduce new language. I'm literally going to change the behavior of how you're saying this thing so that the likelihood of it landing and being heard by your partner increases. A significantly higher likelihood they're going to be able to take in what you're saying and respond with probably like, ah, yeah, shit, my dad, like, sorry, you're right. I meant to do that. I've just been super busy at work. Totally forgot. I will get it done at this time tomorrow or this time tonight, whatever. Versus the first one, they're going to respond with like screw you. I've been super busy. Like, you don't have any empathy for me. You don't even know how busy I've been. And right away, we're off to the races with fighting. So that's the behavior piece. The perception piece is going to be something like, if I can help this person say things in the right way, the way it's received, literally the perception of what's being said and how it lands is going to shift. It's an entirely different experience. And then the physiology piece is, we call it self-soothing. Most fights, most issues in a relationship, I mean, like literally 69% is the number they've, sort of come up with. 69% of conflict, of issues in a relationship cannot be resolved. That's totally normal. Healthy, happy relationships, that percentage is the exact same as in like dysfunctional ones. I'm saying this because of those issues, what is different between people who are good at relationships and people who are not is that people who are good at their relationships are able to dialogue around these unresolvable issues. There's open dialogue around things. So my husband's an introvert, I'm more of an extrovert. Not actually the case, but let's say that's an easy example. Never going to change. He's not going to be an extrovert. I'm not going to be an introvert. Like, that's never going to change. We have to be able to talk about this thing throughout time, or it's going to fester. Potentially has a potential to fester and sort of become really gridlocked, really stuck. So the self-soothing piece, though, the physiology piece comes in from that core triad of balance of physiology, in that if I'm talking to my partner about this, I have to stay grounded in this conversation. I have to be able to, if I'm getting ramped up, if I'm getting flooded, if I'm getting overwhelmed, I have to say, you know what, actually just give me a minute, and like bring myself down to be able to stay engaged in the conversation. So we want new stability. Like, couples are always stable. They always have homeostasis in terms of physiology, perception, behavior. When they get to me, it usually sucks. So we're trying to like shift them over with, we want new stability in healthier ways that we know are associated with longevity and happiness in relationship. So I feel like that was a really long answer. I hope that it makes sense.
No,
Good?
that's great. Yeah, I really like,
Cool.
and
Okay.
I like that you bring up homeostasis because that helps me like envision it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because in the more physical world that I spend day to day,
Yeah.
if you give me someone who's underweight and we try to add muscle to their frame, or someone who's extremely overweight and we try to reduce fat on their frame,
Yeah.
both of those things can actually make them healthier but because
Yeah.
because of that homeostasis principle, they might actually just want to anchor down and not
Yeah.
change. And so
Yeah.
when like for me, like yes, these are good layman's terms. I am understanding
Oh,
it, but
sure.
I really latch onto that homeostasis part is that
Yeah.
even if me and my wife are, I don't know, fighting like cats and dogs or whatever
Yeah.
and having issues, that is our homeostasis. To
Yeah.
change is
Yes.
what's the Isaac Newton thing is like an object that
Inertia
re an
stays
object
at
that rests
rest.
tends to stay at
Yeah.
rest. If we're resting over here and like we do pretty good.
Yeah.
But a couple, it's whether it's me or somebody else, if they're always fighting like this and the yelling and the screaming, the door slamming is like their
Yeah.
go-to, that's what they know, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
to change it, I guess, is the challenge.
It's concerted effort. Yeah. Which I mean, it ties in like if you're talking about the interventions piece, I just want to make sure I know that you'd asked about like what are some things. There's a couple. I am super biased. I'll be straight up. I'm just very, very biased in that in couples therapy, there are a wide variety of approaches. I'm sure it's the same thing in strength and conditioning and strongman and weightlifting. I don't even know, and I know, like I know there's all these different people who have different approaches to doing a similar behavior, a similar task, or a similar goal, you know? It's the same in therapy. There's a hundreds of different theoretical approaches, hundreds of different interventions, et cetera. My For me, the sort of, I would say probably end all be all is Gottman methodology. So John Gottman and Julie Gottman are this couple. John started studying couples in the late 70s, I think. So he studied couples. Specifically, he was interested in divorce, why couples got divorced for 20 plus years on his own, met Julie, and then she was a therapist. She's a skilled, very skilled trauma therapist and was interested also in like, well, you're studying this, why do couples also stay together? And they created this whole like the Gottman Institute. And so they have a theory, they have interventions, everything they do is research based. I know that John, I'm sure I'm butchering this, but he was like an MIT master's level mathematician. So his like ability to math and like do the research and the scholarly stuff is just very, very good. His research is constant. They still are constantly engaged in research. So for me, um, I love Gottman methodology and it is very, very grounded in research. So all of that to segue into there are some, they have a lot of interventions within their approach. It's not a theory, it's just a methodology. It's an approach to working with couples. So I'm pretty like existential and kind of attachment based from a theoretical perspective, which probably doesn't mean anything other than I think humans always grapple with death and meaning and isolation and freedom. I think those are like universal conditions of being human and also connection with one another and like being in relationship and emotionally attuning. That's like at my core. But how people do this is Gottman methodology. Like the research of couples, the science of couples is specifically this. And so there are a couple of things I especially like. One is called an aftermath of a fight. So anytime you have a shitty fight, I'll ask couples, have you talked about this? So aftermath of a fight, for example, is one intervention. And the ones who come in to see me, of course, I have a skewed sample, I'm sure. They're not good at like talking about what happened. So being able to process a conflict or just like a regrettable moment, and not get back into the thick of it is a skill. And so that's something that is I mean, is one of my favorite interventions. There's something called a Gottman-Rappaport intervention. So John Gottman and I think his name is Mike Rappaport. And it's basically teaching people how to listen and how to speak, like how to say things in a way that you have the highest possibility of it being heard correctly and a feeling understood at the end of it. Um, but what feels important in like Gottman-Rappaport, for example, is that listening. Like most people don't know how to listen. And I mean that sincerely, like most people are listening to talk or they're listening to rebut or they're listening so they can just agree with you and add on what they want to say. Like there's, for me, I think there's an art in listening as I'm sitting here talking. I understand I'm a podcast guest, but still, it's like, it's ironic, there's an art to listening, like actually listening and like seeking to explore more, like instead of just listening and like, okay, thanks, that's it. There's like listening and then like looking and saying, well, what about this? Like, tell me more about this part, or let's expand here. Or what about this? So that's just another intervention that is very important for couples to learn, very hard for couples to learn, but like kind of foundational for the rest of the work that we do together. And there's another one that I would say is very key. Two more. One is teaching people how to self-soothe, so to regulate their physiology whenever they start to get overwhelmed. One is noticing when you're getting overwhelmed, and two is being able to bring yourself back down. And then the fourth intervention is something called dreams within conflict. So let's say a couple comes in and they're arguing about, a budget is like the easiest example. They're arguing about a budget. Who sets a budget? And they're just bickering about this. It's been going on for fucking years. They're arguing about a budget and come to realize their fundamental values around spending and saving money are just different. They're not arguing about a budget. They are not on the same page from a values-based perspective and what that represents to them and what their dreams are about spending or saving or how they live or the poverty they grew up in or the wealth they grew up in. Like they're arguing about something that they're not even talking about. The argument's about a budget, but the conversation is actually much, much, much bigger in scope and feel, and it's values-based, and it's the culture of who we are as a couple, as a family. So that is another like very specific intervention that we use with people, that I use with people, but that anybody trained in Gottman methodology can use with people. So I would say those four: learning how to listen, speak and listen, the Gottman-Rappaport, aftermath of a fight, flooding, like again, the self-soothing piece, and then the dreams within conflict, like the values-based conversation within a conflict between people. So those are key ones.
I feel like you're almost talking about like a martial artist. Like we teach them how to do like takedowns and then defenses, and then we make sure they can they know how to breathe so they don't get winded. I mean, I feel like you're almost talking about just like the local mixed martial arts gym down the street or something. But I didn't, it's just neat to hear like the different skills and like you have these compartments, but you don't want to get too hot and you want to use the right language and you want to learn how to listen, and it's very interesting.
People want to come in and feel better, and by starting to do it, they do feel better in general. But I mean, I almost never see somebody less than at least a year, for less than a year, because you get it like every time they come in. They don't have the skills to do this all at once. You're learning like one thing at a time. And then you're coming back, and then we're doing it again. And then you're coming back and you fucked it up. And so we're going to talk about what went wrong and what we need to do slightly differently. And then you're coming back. I mean, it's a skill. There's literally, it's an art and science to relationships.
How about before, and with these couples, are you seeing couples that are not married, or is it pretty much everybody married?
They can be not married. I see some people, as long as they're committed. I've seen people who are very early on committed, like they're just been together for a couple years, and people who've been together for 30, 40. It's sort of just the whole gamut of it's I mean this with no no negative anything. There's no I forget the word I'm thinking of, negative connotation when I say this, but it's all the same. The skill is all the same at any juncture, at any point in the relationship. A snapshot of somebody together for 6 months or 60 years, it's going to be the kind of the function of how it happens is going to be very, very similar.
Let's say whether they're married or they are, would you say they're just
committed? Yeah.
I think I could probably extrapolate and create a better question, but let's say we're just talking about marriage, and let's say that there's a turning point for that type of commitment. what do you have any advice for people? Because again, I spend a lot of time around these college age men and women, boys and girls. They're over 18, so men and women, and a lot of them are in that first relationship or that second relationship, and they get their hearts broken.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice or for them? Is it about learning this argument style or this disagreement style or conflict style, or what are some of like the telltale signs that maybe that partner is not going to work out, that partner who you think you found your husband or wife and you didn't?
Yeah. Yeah, gosh. I have two thoughts. Is that one is that you have to be with a person who is willing and interested in doing life with you. So even if you argue great, even if you like have a great relationship, two people have to be committed. So um I want to say that because I think with that people come in, I love couples. I love couples therapy, and not everybody stays together. And that's honestly not my goal. There are people who, I mean, if one person wants a baby and the other doesn't, I have no stake in the game of what they decide to do. My stake is how they do it. That's my, like, I am going to help you have the most honest, sometimes excruciating, but typically very enlightening, relieving, eyes wide open conversation that you can in order to make a decision about what you want to do with your lives, with each other, with your lives. Not everybody stays together. Um, and so I think that, especially for like young love and like sometimes even unrequited love, it's like more one-sided. Part of being in a committed relationship is two people wanting to be in that relationship. And you can't make that, I can't like, nobody can really make both partners want to stay. So it might be in some cases where you just have a partner that doesn't want to do it. Like, yeah, that could just be it. That can just be the answer. As shitty as that feels, as like excruciating as that can be, that can sometimes just be it. Like it's just it, sort of the way that it goes. And the other piece is, excuse me, depending on if somebody is bad at communicating, bad at emotional intimacy, like being vulnerable with their partner, opening up, expressing what's happening for them. I don't know in the case, I actually don't know in the case with like athletes and strong men and, I I'm thinking of like Louis Simmons, like and listening to him talk, I don't know if he's like I think he's probably a little more extreme, maybe on like the extreme end, he's not like a touchy-feely type of guy. So I think about being partnered with someone like that, you're going to get someone who probably says like, "What's the fucking problem? Get over it," where it's like, "Big deal. Your cat died. Who cares? I broke my back and I deadlifted, 500 pounds right after. Like, what's the, like, that's not for a lot of partners of someone like that, that doesn't feel like enough emotional intimacy." And so I don't know in the case with like the people you're sort of working with and training, I don't know in that sample if there's also more interest in, not more interest, but if that's not as much of a developed skill, that's not fair for me to, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just like wondering, like, I wonder if there's something about emotional intimacy feeling difficult. Also, specifically, I'll say, like, if we're, let's say binary genders, binary sexes, I'm going to say for men, it's more difficult, broadly speaking, than it is for females. Um, and also, I'll get roasted saying that. I think my profession would be furious with me if they heard me saying that out loud. But I think there is something to that. It's what I see consistently. It's the research that I know kind of points to this, that men tend to have more of a struggle with emotional intimacy, with vulnerability. And also, what was I going to say? I'm talking about that because that makes me wonder about, well, if there's not enough emotional intimacy, a partner might feel like this is lacking, like this relationship, it doesn't have enough depth for me to stay engaged. Like you're sex, like this isn't enough for me. I want more. And what somebody like that is saying is connection, emotionality, vulnerability from their partner. I feel like I had one more thing to say, but I might just end right there because I don't know what the third thing was.
Yeah,
I'm not
you
sure if
sort of
that's helpful.
you alluded to 2 points, and then I think you had mentioned two things. So
Yeah, okay.
so it sounds like a healthy ideal couple, some of their attributes would be they're good fighters. They know how to they know how to
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah, yeah,
Even though he says 69% of the issues are not going to be resolved,
yeah. Literally, yes.
they know when to fight and how to fight.
Let's say healthy relationships have a base level of friendship. And this is, I actually will send you this diagram. Don't let me forget. It's called the Sound Relationship House. Long-term, long-lasting, healthy relationships, there's a base level of friendship, which is comprised of three things, but we don't have to get into that right now. Actually, I will. Base level of friendship, love maps, meaning you like know your partner's world. Like if I know what my husband did yesterday, he knows what I did. I know his favorite flower or his favorite tree. I know his fondest childhood memory. I know, like that's love maps. It's sort of like a cognitive space for your partner. That's sort of the base level of friendship. That's level one. Level two is sharing fondness and admiration. So feeling cherished, feeling loved, feeling valued in your relationship, feeling like your partner likes you, basically. And the level three piece, again, these three levels within the friendship system, is turning towards instead of away or against. So if my partner says something, I respond. I acknowledge what he says, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Or like, yeah, the sky's blue out. Yeah, it is. It's pretty today. Or it's like, wow, yeah, it was really raining. Or, he says I lost my pen, and I say, oh, that stinks, or something, some like acknowledgement versus turning away is just straight up ignoring what he said or just changing the subject entirely, like no acknowledgement of what was being said. Turning against is Gabe in the office yelling at Andy, shut up about the
Shut up
sun.
about the sun.
Shut up about the
Shut
sun.
up
Like,
about the sun.
Andy's like, what the fuck? Like, I was just saying, like, the sun is this far from the earth. And then Gabe has this like loud, like angry sort of, shut up. That's a turning against response. That is really not very healthy. So we want a 5-to-1 ratio, especially in conflict, of turning towards versus turning away or against. We want a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio. That's like nuts and bolts. People start thinking about, well, I don't know if I have enough positive interactions. It doesn't need to be positive like you feel really good after. It just needs to be positive like you're acknowledging, you're turning towards, you're acknowledging what's being said, you're responding to a bid from your partner in some way. That's turning towards. So that's friendship, love maps, sharing fondness and admiration, turning towards. There's also perspective. So this is giving your partner the benefit of the doubt versus assuming ill intent. There is trust and commitment. So feeling like you can depend on your partner. That's trust, emotional dependence, and also an absence of betrayals. And then commitment is being committed to the relationship. There's conflict, which is being able to fight well, and then also and repair when it doesn't go well. And then there's also it's called shared meaning and life dreams, creating shared meaning and making life dreams come true. But ultimately, this is like the existential portion of your relationship. So some of those like the goals you have in life, the symbols, the roles that you each sort of exist in, support, how this looks as a family unit. So friendship, conflict, trust and commitment, existential themes, and then also perspective. These are the requirements, requirements. When all of these things are going well, people tend to be very, very satisfied and happy in their relationships.
Awesome. I'll be checking that out for sure, and I'll put that up on the screen.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. At least 4 decades, maybe going on 45 years at this point, thousands and thousands of couples. I mean, it seems so simple. And then you realize they used to think that therapy was best by therapists being antagonistic, or that couples therapy was great if you took foam bats and hit each other and screamed. And like, there's all these myths about what good couples therapy was that seemed like, oh, that makes sense. And it's horrible. It's not good at all until there's like research to support, no, this is actually what's good. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Um, what do you see in your future and the future of, I guess we'll call it maybe the industry, just like you were talking about, maybe we're coming out of the stone age of
Yeah,
like
yeah, literally
or
hitting each other.
organized pillow fights and structured yelling matches or whatever into
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more science based. Are we where we need to be, or what do you think maybe some new things will be in the future for the industry and for yourself?
Mhm. Yeah, so for myself, I think I love teaching. I miss teaching. So I see certification in probably a couple of different approaches, but mostly to get really good at couples and to keep a caseload. So keep working with couples and to train other therapists in couples therapy in particular, especially Gottman methodology. I want to be a consultant and trainer for the Gottman Institute and hosting larger retreats and workshops for couples, like multiple at a time, and doing that's my own future. For the industry, what I think would be sick, oh my gosh, is if we moved to, I know this is happening at some places, but I think specifically kind of a little bit of the combination of AI, which pains me to say. I don't think AI should do therapy, but I do think AI should help with facial coding. So some of the Gottman research is on it's uh, it's called specific facial affect coding system, I think. Paul Ekman, like he was a researcher, and I think he's the guy that realized there are, oh gosh, he found 7 universal emotions. He's the guy that studied across cultures the universal emotions.
Okay, yes, that sounds familiar.
Okay, in infancy, yeah, so happy, mad, sad, surprised, scared, disgusted, and mm, maybe there's only six. Maybe six, and then seven is contempt. No, that's not right. It doesn't matter. There's at least those six. Later on in life, anyway, so I think he's the one that helped develop this like coding, like for micro expressions. So what's really cool is if you're working with a couple, you're not just helping them language things, you're looking at their physical, like what they're doing in session. So if somebody starts like fluttering their eyelids a lot, I know they're probably flooding. And so I need to work on self-soothing right then. If somebody is starts playing with their hair a lot, or um I know that that's another sign of like self-soothing. If somebody is like one-sided, that one-sided, like I see a little that's contempt. That's a contemptuous expression. I know there's something related to contempt happening. Contempt is the number one predictor of divorce, especially from men towards women. So that is a contempt is hostile humor, or I'm sorry, yeah, hostile humor, mocking, jabs, sarcasm. That's not like banter. Some people are like sarcastic back and forth, and it's playful. When it's not playful, that's contempt. Contempt is, I think it's the buccinator muscle, buccal, something right here, like this, usually one-sided. Disgust is both, right? But contempt is one-sided. Eye rolling, that's contempt. So you can imagine teenagers doing that, but adults do that too in session. So, um, what's really cool is that these happen like they're very fleeting. The language micro expressions mean there's like a microsecond of this expression happening. That's where I think AI could be helpful, because if I record my sessions for myself, but also, we delete them, we hold them in encrypted spaces and all that. But part of it is to watch back and look for those expressions and see what is it that is being missed. And so if we could have almost in real time, or like have the facial affect coding system or software like monitor and capture, like, that's contempt, or your brows furrowed like this and your eyes did this, that's fear. Or, like where you're getting real-time feedback on what's happening for somebody. I think it would be not safe in some instances. So in very clearly abusive dynamics, I would absolutely never use the software, but I would use it for most couples. something like that. I would love to see, I think it is happening already a little bit at the Gottman Institute. I'm almost sure. I would love to see movement in this direction because it sort of indicates something not being said, something happening inside somebody. And when you get people who are, we call it emotion dismissing, but you get people who are not tuned in to their internal state, they're kind of useless. If I say like, hey, wait a second, like what's happening for you right now? Like a reaction seemed funny or a something, and they might say, nothing, I'm fine. And I know, like I clearly know your eyes look glazed and you look sad. Like there's something going on. Then it's not me coming at them. Now it's like the system saying like sadness, or contempt or fear. I think it can maybe depersonalize things a little bit for people who tend to be emotion dismissing. But also I think just as a therapist, kind of having that to say like this expression, like to sort of language the expressions as they're happening, because you also can't look at both partners at once. So
Yeah.
I think that could be very incredible. I don't know if it will happen or not, but that'd be pretty sweet.
I was not expecting the answer, but that's
Oh,
pretty
that's
cool.
funny.
Pretty cool, pretty futuristic. And I also know
Yeah.
there's been times that you're like arguing with somebody and they do a little eye roll, and then your
Yes.
your
Yeah.
body temperature goes up a couple
Yeah.
degrees, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm wasting my time, and then they are, no, I didn't, and like there's
That's
silly little
contempt.
there's silly
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
things like that. But you made me think of two things. One is there's a book called, it's an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah.
Haven't read it in a long time. It's called Blink, by Malcolm Gladwell,
Oh yeah. 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 I know that
and
book. Yeah.
they talk about analyzing and diagramming facial
Yeah.
features, and
So cool.
and I don't know if it's the exact same thing you were talking
Yeah.
about, but it's very similar. It has to do with
Yeah.
the nerves attaching to certain muscles and how they talk
Yeah.
about, I don't know if it's that book or maybe something else, but they talk about a Duchenne smile, how
Yeah. Yeah. This.
you can make yourself
Yep. That's a
um
Duchenne smile, where your eyes don't crinkle. Oh wait, or the Duchenne smile is the real one or the
I
fake
thought that
one?
I thought, and I could be wrong, it's been a while. I thought the Duchenne smile was the real one, where you have
Oh, got it. Never mind
these
then. My bad.
these where your eyes are smiling too.
Yeah, the crow's
But
like the, I can't even now. I can't even real smile. There, wait, there you go. You get the crow's
yeah,
feet. Here,
yeah.
that's the real smile. Yeah.
Um, but this might be, I believe maybe this is from Dr. Amy Cuddy. She was a sociologist at like Stanford, maybe, but
Yeah.
she did a TED talk and a book. Her book is called Presence. It's about body language and how body
Yeah, I love
language
that.
affects your cortisol and your testosterone levels. So if you stand
Hmm.
around like Wonder Woman and you power pose,
Hmm.
you will get a testosterone release and a cortisol drop.
Yeah, that's cool as hell.
You talked about The Office earlier. There's an episode where Dwight is he's listening to rock music and he's pumping himself up before he goes in.
Raised.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So, but they say that you can fake it and then
yeah.
you become it. So, the
Hmm.
Duchenne smile, if you're sad, if you take a pencil or your finger and you put it in there like that,
Oh yeah.
they say it activates those Duchenne smile muscles, and that
Yeah.
actually makes you a little happier. So what you were just talking
Incredible.
about made me think about that book, Blink, and a
Yeah.
little bit of Dr. Amy Cuddy with Presence.
Hmm.
Um, and there's this guy Dave Asprey who does quite a bit of biohacking, and
Whoa.
I
Dave
don't know
Asprey.
I don't know the exact system that he uses, but
Huh?
I've heard. But he's when you're talking about the AI, like maybe I'm a contemptuous husband. I also love my wife. I don't know if the two things
Yeah.
are mutually, I don't know if they're
No, they
mutually
are not
exclusive.
mutually exclusive. No, they're
So
not. Yeah.
maybe I have this contempt self-defense mechanism, or it's a bad habit, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I really love that lady, that I'm being rude to,
Hmm.
that doing therapy or having conversations with a little buzzer that goes off every time I portray bad.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
but what Dave Asprey does is he says he went in this place and wore some headgear, and it would look at his brainwaves and he would meditate. And
Yeah.
he said he caught up to like Buddhist monks with like multiple decades of meditation practice,
Yeah.
but because
So
he was
cool.
able to get immediate feedback, he
Yeah.
was able to uh, create like, what are the term? He was able to utilize like expedited like neuroplasticity and
Yeah.
and so anyways, when you were talking about the AI, I was thinking like, yeah, just a little buzzer that goes off every time you make
Super
like
cool.
you make a crappy face or something insulting or
Yeah.
belittling to somebody. And
Yep.
yeah, that's I mean, that's
That's super
interesting.
cool.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure to say this in case anybody is listening and what you just said made me think, oh, I should probably clarify. Happy couples also they have horsemen. So horsemen being criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness. There's four horsemen. The idea behind horsemen is that the more present they are, the higher likelihood of relationship dissolution or like demise, basically. Um, we say dissolution and not divorce because there are people that stay unhappily partnered or unhappily married, but it means the relationship can like, go down the shitter. So happy couples still do, they sometimes in lesser, with less frequency and with less maybe intensity, depending on the fight or depending on what's happening. They also do horsemen. So in case you think, oh shoot, I roll my eyes at my partner, cool. Like it's all right. Like everybody, maybe not every single person, like people have different default horsemen. So mine might be criticism, for example, and my husband, it is like if I have a horseman, it's probably going to be criticism and my husband's going to be defensiveness. And so then it might get to stonewalling. Then there might be some contempt, but that's like way far off. There's typically default horsemen for people, like their go-to, and they exist in almost every single couple. And so it's normal. We just don't want them to be the norm. We'd rather those be decreased and then healthy, the antidotes to the horseman, because there's also antidotes to the horseman be like the norm, pretty much. So just clarifying that. Also, you made me think about with Dave Asprey, gosh, yeah, there's a bunch of biohacking. We'll use pulse oximeters in session also, like little like pulse oxes. So that way O2 levels don't matter as much for the purpose of what we do, but heart rate. If I
Yeah.
know someone is at 80 beats a minute, if their baseline is 60, let's say, I'm sure baseline for people you work with is less. With athletes, I think it tends to like baseline is lower. But if you're looking at like about 20 to 25 beats per minute above their baseline, someone might stonewall. Like you've gone into potentially, we call it DPA or diffuse physiological arousal. They're in a very heightened state. And so I know if I see someone's heart rate monitor or if it goes over 100, we're done talking and we are only going to engage in a self-soothing and a relaxation exercise to bring this heart rate back down. Because at that point, you can't listen. Like literally, there's no listening that happens. Once you're at that point, your brain is sort of done. It's like, I can't think, I can't respond, I can't take in what's being said, I can't listen. Some people hear basically static, like they're just not even able to take in anything that's being said. For the partner, it feels like feels like you're not even listening to me. And for the person who's not listening and like they're sort of in this really, really flooded, maybe stonewalled state, it's because they can't listen. They can't hear, they can't engage, they can't think straight. So their partner sort of feels, like they've been left. Like, why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you responding? Why aren't you listening? And the person in that state cannot. And so if we have a pulse ox in session, for example, or somebody who's able to like take their heart rate and is like paying attention to what's happening in their body, we know, okay, if you're at 90 beats per minute, like slow down. If you're at 95, just stop. Just take a breath. Both of you recalibrate for 2 minutes and then reconnect and try again. If you're at 100, you need to take about 15 minutes. Like you need to get your heart rate back down to where it was before you even reconnect or try to re-engage in this conversation. So I was just thinking of like the AI use with the facial affect coding and sort of the biohacking stuff. I also think just having biofeedback because not everybody is connected into their body. I think the benefit of working with probably your population is that my guess is they're very tuned in to their bodies. Most of them, I would
Uh,
hope.
I think yes and no.
Yeah.
I think they are present, but my age group is also the average age is about 20 years old. So they're
Yeah.
present, but they have less they have less years on the planet. So
Yeah, yes, for sure.
they are they've got awesome, fresh, brand new vehicles, but they don't have as many like
Yeah,
miles on
yeah.
the road. They haven't driven them that much. So
Yeah,
um, but also I have not I haven't sat in on counseling with 20-year-olds. So
yeah, sure.
I think it'd be curious to see what their heart rates would do under that stress. But
Yeah,
everything you just talked about, um, we see with coaching is that you have to pick if you're going to coach the
yeah,
middle. If somebody comes off the field and they're hyperventilating,
yeah,
you're just wasting your breath.
yeah, literally.
You're not quite wasting your breath talking to them, but if you can give them a beat, that will really help. And what they'll do, I have a little bit of experience and a lot of interest in the tactical area, as in training military warriors, law enforcement officers,
Oh, yeah,
is they will jack their heart rates up and then they'll ask them simple questions
yeah,
and not necessarily like any of us, because instead of your frontal lobe taking, at rest, your brain takes about 20% of your blood flow, your oxygen, and your calories. Uh,
yeah.
people who people who sit around and do chess tournaments, they can burn like 6,000 calories a day just because their brain is just
Wild.
buzzing.
Hmm.
But when your heart rate jacks up and you've got blood going to your muscles and sometimes people get angry and you can see the veins in their head
Yeah.
and necks and stuff. That that blood flow to the brain does diminish, and you can ask them. So what they'll do is they'll knock the wind out of people and they'll ask them arithmetic questions, and it's part
Oh,
entertainment, but it's also like, hey, you've got to recognize, you're
yeah,
talking about 100 beats per minute and being civil, maybe.
yeah,
Um, but they're talking about when you're out and other people have knives and things like that, you don't
yeah,
want to shoot your partner or a civilian or
yes,
something like that. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a big part. Again, kind of funny that what we're talking about in your counseling sessions are being like
hmm,
high end violence is also sort of
yeah,
there's there's a connection there or
yeah,
a mirrored pattern maybe.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it feels all the same to me. Like at anywhere I look, I feel like I see the same thing. Like it's just everything is a microcosm. It's all the same. You know what I mean? Like of course it's not actually the same, but like it's sort of the underlying function. Like it doesn't matter if someone's talking about an affair or about parenting or if they're training for something intense or if they're teaching or coaching or if they're on their deathbed or like everything, sort of points back from my perception, it kind of points back to like that physiology piece, that being able to engage with other people around you, kind of tuning into yourself and others and having skills to be able to stay engaged and to say things in accurate and honest ways. Like, I mean, it feels so similar across, yeah, yeah, feels very similar across the board.
well, we've all got the same problems, huh? Just
Yeah, basically.
and
Yeah,
I know you're a mother of three, and that's one thing that
yeah,
kind of I did my counselor education and my interning in 2017 in a play therapy
yeah,
facility. And
yeah,
one thing that blew me away was because I didn't want to go work with kids. I didn't have kids. I've never really been around kids. I've coached kids just a little bit up to that point. Children, you know.
sure.
Um, but I would have rather done anything besides play therapy. And then, as is often the case, like a month or two into it, you're like, hey, this is amazing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but one thing that blew me away, I was like, oh my gosh, all these little kids that have these problems and these patterns with their thinking, we are just big dumb kids who have this. All these adults, we're just taller and older, but we have the same patterns as these little stinkers, you know?
yes,
Um, so I thought that was kind of like, it was almost
yeah.
disappointing in a way that, like, you mean to tell me that
We're the
when I,
exact same.
like, that when I'm like 60, I'm gonna have the same thought patterns as a
Yeah,
6-year old and like the same
yeah,
reaction tendencies. So that was kind of like a
humbling.
humbling and
Yeah,
it's just like it was like seeing like like the whatever it is, the wizard behind the curtain, and
Oh yeah, the man
it's
behind
like
the curtain.
you're like
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
the big trick is that we're all the same, even though we get
Yeah.
we don't actually outgrow this stuff. So
Yeah.
um
It's like the oak tree. I mean, I think I always think like acorn to oak tree. It's everything is right there. Like you look at an oak tree and you think that's unfathomable that it started as this tiny dinky little acorn that fell off another tree. Like it was a nut, seriously. And everything exists in this like tiny little space. And I think about that, like my children and children, period, their temperament is almost set immediately. My firstborn is very slow to warm up. He's been that way since before he even had stranger danger, like before that like 8 month mark. If you got into his, it's so wild to me. Yeah, I think about like adults having temper tantrums, all these viral videos, that are kind of funny, but like people freaking the fuck out, like they don't have self-regulatory abilities. They don't have the ability to self-soothe. I think about like, yeah, just circular arguments. I mean, it's the exact same from womb to tomb. Like you see the exact people show up in the same way. People, I mean, it's just, I think it's like mind blowing in a really beautiful way. Like I really love that that's the case, that it's kind of the same. The entire process is similar. Like yeah, I think it's kind of cool as hell. Like it doesn't feel deflating to me or defeating. It feels like invigorating, like, oh yeah, shit, because everything exists in us before we're even like in utero. Like we're already everything we're going to be, and like, oh, we're still expressing. Like, how is this changing or evolving, or how are we like um yeah, growing over time, but still with some very like similar fundamental things. Yeah, I
yeah,
do. I think it's awesome.
yeah, that only being a father to two, it is really neat how they're just wired different.
Yes.
Same
Yeah.
household, same environment, and they're just different creatures right from the
Yep.
get-go. It's fascinating for sure.
Hmm.
One of my go-to questions is I talk about winning wellness. That's the name of the podcast. Is
Yep.
some people need to win their wellness to kind of get back into a state of health. And we talked about homeostasis earlier, is that they're out of their competition homeostasis. So some people need to work to get back to that, and then those people who are well enough to compete, they attempt to do so. Is there anything that we haven't talked about today that when I say how do you win your wellness, is that kind of like ring any bells or bring up anything?
Yeah. Do you mean personally or do you mean for like like in general, like related to couples?
It could be I guess I'm interested in both, but it could be
Yeah.
what people are not doing that they should, or what you're not doing that you should, or
Yeah.
yeah, anything.
Yeah, please. Okay, so well, I'll say what I'm not doing that I should is going to sleep earlier. My sleep is not disrupted, but I get so little time to myself, and Steve and I get so little time for each other that it's really hard to go to sleep at a time that I should, because it's nice just to be in a space without kids, like kids being awake and asking for things and needing things. And so that's one thing that I should be doing that I'm not. I will also say I want to start lifting again, but I'm going through the symmetry program, so I'm not at a place yet. So I'm doing like the stretches and sort of getting my body back in alignment. Um, so that feels like winning a little bit. Journaling also for me feels like winning because I get a lot of insights, and it's really helpful for just honestly processing and making sense of things that are happening in life. Um, I will say related to couples, I don't know if this is something where I think that just what feels important is for people to know especially for like this podcast, sort of this focus on physical health in particular, but winning wellness broadly for me is like happily married versus or partnered versus unhappily partnered or married. There are physical health ramifications. So people who are unhappily married or partnered, there's You see like lower immune system functioning. You see like cardiology, endocrinology, immune system, immunology, mortality. You see different rates of cancer, different rates of heart disease. You see different perceptions of pain. Like it's all worse for people who are unhappily partnered. And so when people think about their relationship, I think that sometimes people might think of it as like um, tertiary rather than primary. And for me, it should be my like ask is that it becomes primary because it has such an impact on your entire and the mental health and physical health experience in the world. So that would be my like if you winning wellness would also be relationship health is paramount. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know it just having being in a rut or being in like a middle of like an argument or something like that, it is hard to think clearly, to think positively, to even your eating might go down the drain a little bit, and
Yeah.
the workouts may not happen the way they're supposed to. And I
Yeah.
have with my athletes, there's I think I don't know what it is, but over the last few years, like that's one of the biggest things. Like I just broke up with my boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm having a tough day. Like would it be all
Yeah.
right? Would it be all right if I didn't work out today? And
Yeah.
I tell them, hey, of course. Like I'm sorry you're going through that. And I'll say like on their way out, I just might be like, hey, you might want to go for a walk though. Like even though
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
running and jumping and lifting weights and
Yeah.
everything like that with the team, like just moving your body might be a good idea.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
it's helpful. And being in
yeah,
nature. Send for a hike. Like if you
yeah,
go walk in the woods. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
love it.
and even thinking about for people who are having kids, satisfaction for 65% of couples drops within the first 1 to 3 years after your first kid, like the lowest it'll go. For your second kid, that percentage of couples that it drops is up to 85%. So if you like anybody, I know you have two, I have three, and the third has been the one of the easier babies, hardest time for Steve and I both, the hardest time in our relationship.
Yeah,
Uh, I'm openly saying this. He doesn't care. Like we both know, like we're in this for the long haul, but it's been hard, hard, hard. And so I think about that's just something to not consider, but something to know. Like it's you can work to mitigate the drop, but there are drops. So um I don't know why I think you saying you have kids and like thinking about being in a rut, it's like, oh yeah, totally standard. Still sucks, but like really, really common. Yeah.
yeah. So you should not have a kid to save the relationship. It's probably not
Oh
gonna.
God, no, no, my God. Have a kid if you want to end your relationship, if you're questioning if this saves it, it will not.
Yeah.
Probably not. Like, ugh. Oh, that makes me kind of sick, honestly. Like, please don't do that. Like, oh my God. Yeah, no, that would be bad.
As someone who's lucky to be in a from what I think is a happy, healthy relationship,
Yeah, yeah.
it could be wrong.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I mean, your perception is
but
like key in this. So no, that's good. Yeah.
um, but you know, I'm not looking for tools to go home and say things, but I see things like, oh, I better watch out for that.
Yeah.
Or I see things that could be future problems, or, you know,
Mhm.
we're doing good, but we could be doing up here if maybe my argument style or my discussion style was a little bit sharper, like, gosh, we could be up there. So I know personally I have some good takeaways as well. Um,
Ooh, one more takeaway. Look up I'll actually send this also, the Sound Relationship House. It used to be Magic 5 hours. I think it's Magic 6 hours. So 6 hours a week spread out over 7 days for things to do to make sure that your relationship stays healthy or is enhanced a little bit. I will send it to you. It's like partings, reunions, date nights, uh appreciation and oh my gosh, there's one more that I'm forgetting. I'll send it to you though, but it's a little like graphic of here's how the time breaks down over the course of 7 days. Simple, easy to do, easy to implement, and pretty
Sweet.
effective, which again,
Yes.
it's research, so of course it's going to be
Yeah.
effective.
Sweet. I'll take
Cool.
it.
Yeah,
And
cool.
then This one's optional, but is there a good way for listeners to reach out or connect?
Yeah, I'm going to say my website, which is TaraVossenkemper.com, with the caveat that it's going through a huge evolution. So that's going to be, you're going to like potentially get there and see there's a lot more for like, I do consulting for business owners, for group therapy practice owners, but it's expanding. I'm going to do more like clinical consultation is going to be on there, retreats and workshops, etc. So I would say point people there. That makes the most sense to me. TaraVossenkemper.com.
Absolutely, that's what I'll
Yeah,
do.
cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Fetch.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to our Winning Wellness podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for podcast guests or topics, you can submit those through YouTube comments. You can message me on Instagram. My handle is Mitch Schwartzman, or you can email me at coachmitchschwartzman@gmail.com.